Good evening. Today is September the 23rd of 2025. I hope everybody's had a good day. Tonight I want to talk about the 70th anniversary of a very tragic event. September 23rd is not um, the anniversary of the event that started everything, but it is one of the events that followed. Emmett Till, a young African American from Chicago, was murdered in the Mississippi Delta. And it was on September the 23rd of the same year, that 1955, that Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam were found not guilty in the murder of Emmett Till. My primary source is this book, A Death in the Delta, The Story of Emmett Till by Stephen J. Whitfield. I read this book like 30 years ago. Some of the background: 1954 in Black Monday, Judge Tom P. Brady denounced Brown versus Board of Education. And his words seemed to become fulfilled in the death of Emmett Till. Brown versus Board of Education was on May the 17th, 1954. The second Brown decision, Brown 2, was on May 31st of 1955, and it called for desegregation with all deliberate speed. Now, some districts thought that they could take up to 100 years to implement it, which was not the intent. Since Reconstruction, at least 3,000 African Americans were lynched in the United States. And it is not true to say that the civil rights movement would not have happened had it not been for the brutal murder of Emmett Till. Well, certainly Till's murder was a catalyst that sparked many of the events that followed. Traditionally, most white Mississippians were bewitched by the shadow of the Ethiopian, has been said. And segregation was a way of life. And there are a lot of events that preceded the murder of Emmett Till. A long history of slavery, the Civil War, Reconstruction, and the birth of Jim Crow segregation during the post-Reconstruction period. Uh, Lynching is described as illegal execution. And according to Gunnar Myrdal, his book, An American Dilemma, dealing with American racism, sex was the principle around which the whole structure of segregation of the Negroes was organized. Fear of black men raping white women, even though white men had a long history of raping black women during slavery and years afterward. And there was definitely a double standard there. But Emmett Till was called the Chicago Boy. At the time, Chicago was a city that sheltered more Mississippi-born blacks than anywhere in the U.S. And he was born in 1941, died in 1955. He had a white girlfriend in Chicago. And he has had cousins from the Delta. Both his mother and grandmother were from the Mississippi Delta. His family had visited with him in Chicago, and he wanted to go visit them in the Delta. They let him do so, but his mother and grandmother tried to tell him that the social customs and rules were much different in Mississippi than they were in Chicago. It was on August 24th, 1955, that uh, he, along with some cousins, teenagers, happy go lucky kids, probably didn't know much about politics. The whole issue of racial equality as a concept, it was something they really didn't give much thought to. They were in a 1946 Ford and they drove to Money, a hamlet of a couple of hundred residents located in LaFleur County. The town had one paved road and consisted of three stores, plus a post office, a school, a gas station, and a building for gin and cotton. And nobody knows for sure what happened that afternoon in that grocery store. Uh, it's been reported that Emmett Till flirted with Carolyn Bryant, um, the cashier, the wife of Roy Bryant, that he asked her for a date and he was leaving the store. He gave what was described as a wolf whistle. We don't know for sure that that happened exactly like that. And because there's conflicting versions of the story. At the time, Carolyn's husband, Roy Bryant, and his half brother, J.W. Milam, were carting a trip to Texas. When they got back, they were outraged at the violation of honor. And so they went and got Emmett from the home of his great uncle, Moses Preacher Wright, in the Delta. And his body was later found. That was after midnight. So it would have been August 25th of 1955. His body was found 15 miles from his mother's birthplace in the Tallahatchie River. And his funeral was held at the Roberts Temple Church of God in Christ in Chicago. His mother, Maybe Till Mobley, insisted that he have an open casket funeral so the whole world could see what was done to her baby. By the way, he was her only child, and Maybe was spent the rest of her life fighting for justice in this case. And the strategy of the defense team seemed to be calling in question the identity of the body, which was very disfigured. It was a ring that he wore. He was used to identify the body. An article, an editorial in Jet magazine at this time, asked whether Mississippi would whitewash its latest and most fiendish atrocity. and they did. There was much media attention. And people tried to link the Till case with the Brown decision of the previous year. Moses Wright took the witness stand. That would change Mississippi justice forever. When he stood up and asked who the man was that took Till from his home, he pointed his finger at J.W. Milam, saying, "There he." He could not believe he had the daring, and many people were surprised, to charge a white man with a crime, something so serious as the murder of a child. And the prosecutor argued that Mamie Bradley's identification of her son's body was crucial. Mamie Till, she'd been married to Lewis Till, Emmett's father, later to a man named Bradley, and finally to a man named Mobley. And it was on September 23rd, 1955. That was 70 years ago today, that the all white, all male jury came up with a not guilty verdict. They took 1 hour and 7 minutes to reach a verdict. The only reason they took so long, they took a break and went and drank Coca-Cola. So they give the impression that they were really deliberating when they already had their mind made up. That date, by the way, was the 166th anniversary of the ratification of the Bill of Rights. The jury was all white and all male. We don't know if having a female on the jury would have made any difference, if a white woman would have been more sympathetic to what Mamie was going through and losing her son. We don't know. The sheriff actually testified for the defense, which is unusual. And that was on a Friday, and it's been called Black Friday. And Moses Wright, well, he was a very courageous man. He was a farmer, a minister of the gospel, but there was no future for him in Mississippi. Uncle Mose, as he was called, received stacks of mail after his testimony. Envelopes continued to offer jobs as well as cash. After testifying, he did not return to the state again. He surrendered his old hunting dog and abandoned his car at the train depot even before the cotton crop had been harvested. He eventually became a farmer in Argo, Illinois, and he gave lectures on the Till case under the auspices of the NAACP. I think he died around 1973. And there was effort to create interest in civil rights aspects of the case, but they were never very successful. It's interesting that there was not near as much public outcry about the Teal case as there was about the Scottsboro boys in Alabama 20 years earlier. But it's understandable why. They were trying to keep the Scottsboro boys from being executed. Emmett Till was already dead, and the rule against double jeopardy prevented the case from being retried. And William Bradford Huey was an eighth generation white Alabamian who wrote a novel called Wolf Whistle in 1959. He was noted as relatively conservative. Nevertheless, he opposed Governor George Wallace and supported the civil rights movement. And basically, he paid those murderers for the right to libel them in print, with the understanding that if Mississippi were to be sued by maybe Till or the NAACP, he would not, if he was subpoenaed as a witness, he would not identify them. And very tragic case. There was efforts to open up the case later to have further prosecutions, but they were never successful. It was in 1978 that Carolyn Bryant, who was called a Crossroads Marilyn Monroe, her husband Roy had been willing to kill to protect her honor. Guess what she did? She divorced him. Both of them eventually remarried. According to this book, J.W. and Juanita Milam also divorced, but that doesn't seem to be accurate because no record has been found of that. J.W. died of cancer in 1980. Juanita lived on until 2014. Roy Bryant also died in 1994. And he had learned welding under the GI Bill, but he eventually returned to Mississippi. When this book was published, he was interviewed. He had another store. And by the way, regarding they had trouble staying in business, and initially, the white community were very supportive of J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant. But after the trial was over, murderers don't make very nice neighbors. And the public opinion turned against them. And the majority of the clientele of the chain of Delta grocery stores these families operated, the majority of the clientele were black. And there's a powerful economic weapon anybody can exercise. It's called the boycott. And it's understandable most black customers would not want to deal with people like that. With 18 months, they were out of business. Years later, he got another grocery store, Roy Bryant did, and he refused to identify the name and the location of his store. He denied killing Emmett Till, but said his memory could be jogged for a large sum of money. And uh, Carolyn Bryant Donham remarried. And there's been an effort to tie her to the case, and it was never proven. And some of the statements she made contradicted other statements. And at one point, she admitted she had not been totally honest about what happened. On the 25th of April of 2023, she passed away in Louisiana. And maybe Till Mobley died in 2003 after devoting her life to um, trying to find justice for her son. A death in the Delta, followed by a miscarriage of justice 70 years ago. Many of the same things are happening now. In efforts to turn back the clock on civil rights, we must all resolve to move forward and not backward. God bless everyone. Have a good evening.